The siren sounded at 3:27 a.m. Sleepers jolted awake, not understanding what was happening, but the red, watchful eyes of Taiwan's defense radars already knew. Dozens of Chinese fighter jets had crossed the strait's median line. That invisible line, informally agreed upon for decades, had just been ignored. And with that, the world woke up to a new reality. Can you imagine what it's like to live on the brink of war every day? Opening your eyes and not knowing if you'll have lunch with your family, or if the missile will come first. Taiwan is experiencing this, a country that refuses to kneel before Asia's greatest military power, a small island surrounded by a giant that says, "You're mine, whether you like it or not." But why does this matter? Why are all eyes on the planet suddenly focused on a place many people didn't even know where it was until yesterday? Because this island carries something that goes far beyond its independence. It carries chips, technology, military strategy, and worst of all, pride. Pride in a China that refuses to be contradicted. Pride in a West that refuses to lose what it considers a model democracy. The result, a powder keg ready to explode in the backyards of billions of people. In the latest war simulation conducted by US military analysts, a direct confrontation between China and Taiwan with the United States involved would result in thousands of deaths in less than 2 weeks, ships sunk, satellites destroyed, infrastructure collapsed, economies paralyzed, and worst of all, no certainty as to who would emerge alive. And all this for an island measuring just 36,000 square kilometers, smaller than the state of Santa Catarina. But today, at the heart of global conflict, it wields the weight of a superpower. The question everyone can't stop asking is, what if tomorrow were the day? If Taiwan formally declared its independence, would China invade? And would the United States react? And what about us? What would happen to the world as we know it? In Taipei, a young woman named Lin cried as she recorded a message for her boyfriend, who was studying abroad. She said, "If anything happens to me, just promise me you'll tell someone our story, so they know we tried to live in peace." And that's what's at stake. People trying to live in peace, while governments play chess with human lives. This video isn't about politics. It's about what happens when greed, power, and fear collide on the same spot on the map, and that spot is called Taiwan, and you will understand now why this place could be the trigger for the next world war. Those who stare at the glow of Xinya's billboards today may be unaware that, before leads, the island was lit by cannon fire. In the 17th century, Spanish galleons founded San Domingo in the north, while the Dutch built Zeelandia in the south, and traded silk for gunpowder. In 1662, Zheng Changgong, the legendary cocksinger, half pirate, half general, expelled the Dutch in a battle that dyed the sands of Amping red. There, the first warning was born. Taiwan is small, but it attracts giants willing to die for it. If it was already valuable back then for its trade routes, imagine what it is worth today, when every square inch holds circuits that connect the entire world. Half a millennium later came the second deep cut. In 1895, defeated in the war, China signed the Treaty of Shimonoseki and handed Taiwan over to Japan. Tokyo transformed the island into a model colony. Roads, railways, sugarcane fields that fed munitions factories. But imposed modernity has a taste of iron. Indigenous rebellions were crushed. The local language was banned in schools, and a new anthem echoed in Shinto shrines. When Hiroshima turned to atomic dust in 1945, control returned to Beijing, but China was no longer whole. Civil war tore across the continent, and Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek, about to lose to Mao, saw the island as a last ditch. October 1949, 2 million nationalist soldiers, central bank gold bars, and entire libraries crossed the strait in overcrowded ships. Chiang vowed to retake the mainland in a few months, imposed martial law, and ruled Taiwan as a military fortress. Washington saw an opportunity. In the midst of the Cold War, the island became a showcase for Asian capitalism. Radars, Hawk missiles, secret treaties. It was in this protected vault that, in 1987, TSMC was born. Whoever controls the chips controls the future, and Beijing knew it. Every silicon wafer produced in Hsinchu became a strategic asset as lethal as any aircraft carrier. But the window was shattered in 1971, when the UN left Taipei for Beijing. Embassies closed, flags came down, and Taiwan discovered that sovereignty can also be measured in passport stamps. Diplomatic isolation raised a burning question to this day. If the world doesn't recognize us, who are we? The answer came from the streets. Students overturned martial law, elected pluralist parliaments, and in 1996, voted for president under the gun of Chinese missiles that fell into the sea to send a message. The Third Strait crisis showed the world lived that national identity is not to be trifled with. We entered the new millennium believing that dollars would unite what ideology separated. Chinese factories assembled iPhones. Shanghai tourists posted selfies at Taipei 101. It seemed like peace until 2016. The victory of Tsai Ing-wen, an outspoken advocate of self-determination, prompted an immediate diplomatic blockade from Beijing. J-16 fighter jets and H-6 bombers began crossing the median line almost daily, while American ships escorted nuclear imaginations through the Indo-Pacific. The status quo is now a routine of air raid warnings, hackers, silent sanctions, and inflammatory speeches at the UN. Here's the present. A 36,000 square kilometer island that holds 90% of the planet's advanced semiconductors, surrounded by a giant sworn to reunify it no matter the cost. The roots of this conflict span pirates, emperors, dictatorships, democracies, and billions of virus-sized transistors. Each layer is a pile of gunpowder. Will anyone strike the match? If the past teaches us anything, it's that Taiwan was never just a dot on the map. It is the open scar of a history that insists on bleeding into the present. Radar rotations silently tell the story. More aircraft, closer, bolder. After 2022, when Nancy Pelosi's visit blew up the board, incursions ceased to be the exception and became routine. In 2022, 565 Chinese aircraft crossed the median line. In 2023, 703. In 2024, 805, while the monthly average of intrusions into the ADIZ jumped from 81 in 2021 to 178 in the first half of 2024. Today, daily reports show J-16 fighters tracing the invisible border, H-6 bombers simulating attacks, drones spying east of the island. Each crossing normalizes the abnormal, pushes the scales another inch, tests nerves, fuel, and patience. Who would blink first? Who would miscalculate milliseconds? This is how wars begin without warning. August 2022 brought the playbook. 6 exercise zones surrounding Taiwan, more than 100 aircraft, more than 10 ships, 11 missiles falling into the C5 within Japan's exclusive economic zone, ports closed, flights diverted, maritime insurance on alert. In 1995-96, the US responded with aircraft carriers. In 2022, Beijing demonstrated reach, coordination, and political appetite. While cutting off military and climate talks with Washington, it wasn't just a message, it was a dress rehearsal for coercion, measuring reaction times, radar saturation, and civilian morale. Since then, every visit, every speech, every election has become a trigger for new exercises. The noise is getting louder. May 2024 brought another layer. 3 days after Lei Ching-te's inauguration, China launched Joint Sword 2024A, involving 111 aircraft, 46 ships, and 82 median line crossings, some brushing the 24-mile line. In October, 2024B arrived, with new choreography and unprecedented patrols by the Chinese Coast Guard around the island, a message that the pressure isn't episodic, it's methodical. Analysts point to the logic, transforming the strait into a gray area, where the border is always malleable and escalation is always available. For Taipei, this is costly. Flight hours, fighter jet wear, interceptions, extra shifts, permanent alert. For the average citizen, it costs sleep and the world. It's trembling at the base of silicon. Taiwan concentrates about 90% of the most advanced chips on the planet, while TSMC leads the foundry market with a share of over 60% and revenues mostly from 7 nanometers or smaller nodes. If the island shuts down, not only cell phones will shut down, AI servers, cars, planes, satellites, and guided weapons will shut down. Estimates indicate losses exceeding $2 trillion United States dollars in a lockdown scenario before second-round effects. Logistics chains are thin, long, and fragile. Tariffs, export controls, and simultaneous shocks have already demonstrated how a single bottleneck reconfigures prices, jobs, and power. Taiwan's crisis isn't regional. It's the heart of the economy's nervous system, vital. Vulnerability lies in the tank and on the plate. Taiwan imports about 97 to 98% of its energy and approximately 70% of its food. The fuel for survival comes by sea, LNG, oil, grain, and animal feed. A naval blockade, even a partial one, would strangle the island as effectively as a missile. knocking out electricity, internet, hospitals, factories, and confidence. Reports cite rice stocks for over 7 months, but natural gas for only about 10 days and coal for 40. Energy, 5 months. Is that enough time? Only if the sea remains open. If it closes, each day weighs a ton. That's why Taipei is rushing to diversify suppliers, stockpile supplies, and train civil resilience. And on the ground, people throb. Sirens, shelters, simulated evacuations, Hongkwang exercises with HIMARS and Abrams aircraft crossing avenues, while in the Japanese archipelago of Yonaguni, 110 kilometers from Taiwan, residents see radars, batteries, and runways growing over fields and memories of war. Some breathe a sigh of relief, others fear becoming a target. CSIS wargames repeat the verdict. Even with a defensive victory, the toll would be brutal. Dozens of ships sunk, hundreds of aircraft shot down, tens of thousands dead. The Taiwanese economy devastated, and the US's global standing wounded for years. The question that haunts those participating in these exercises is simple and cruel. How many of us would survive the day after? 3 doors open before the straight hand. Each carries a price: blockade, quarantine, a limited strike by seizing outlying islands, or a full-blown amphibious invasion. American strategists left Aspen saying that the least explosive solution for Beijing would be to test an adjustable siege, punishing without immediately triggering full US intervention. At the same time, they recalled that she ordered the player to be ready by 2027. Although readiness doesn't necessarily mean decisiveness, the cold logic erode Taiwan's resistance in the gray before risking the red of the landing. Who gives in first, Taipei's political will, or the world's patience? A blockade is the most plausible scenario in the short term, intercepting cargo ships, imposing inspections, creating danger zones, cutting undersea cables, saturating networks with cyber attacks and drones, all below the threshold of declared war. Taiwan is vulnerable. It imports approximately 97 to 98% of its energy and about 70% of its food. Liquefied natural gas is its Achilles heel, 10 to 12 days of supplies, compared to approximately 39 to 42 days of coal and approximately 146 days of oil. All it takes is raising insurance prices, delaying convoys, and closing straits for 72 hours for the island to feel the pinch. A reversible siege can be resumed with each crisis, until the island's will is broken. The limited strike targets, Kinmen and Matsu, small, close to the mainland, a perfect test of nerves. After months of Chinese Coast Guard patrols, drones, and nearby intrusions, analysts describe a campaign short of war plan to seize Kinmen, citing an accident, a common crime, or a restoration of order. It would be swift, bloody enough to shock, but calibrated to confuse allies. Is it worth dying for Istlits? And if they accept today, what's to stop them tomorrow? Beijing is studying this playbook. Taipei is reinforcing sensors, shelters, and civilian evacuation routes. The emotional clock is ticking faster than the diplomatic one. An amphibious invasion remains the highest risk scenario. CSI's wargames, run 24 times, point to a pattern. Taiwan survives democratically in most cases, but the cost is devastating: dozens of ships and hundreds of aircraft lost, tens of thousands dead, and the island's economy devastated. With the US's global standing damaged for years, to succeed, Beijing would need air and sea superiority, massive amphibious forces, missile cover, and strikes on Guam and allied bases. Washington is already planning a long war, dispersing runways, and defending critical infrastructure, admitting impacts on its own territory. Who is ready to pay this price? In the planet's pocket, the bill would come first. About 2.45 trillion United States dollars in trade crossed the strait in 2022. Any quarantine would shake the Pacific's circulatory system. And then there's silicon. TSMC holds approximately equal 60 to 67% of the global foundry market, with overwhelming dominance at the 5 nanometers and 3 nanometers nodes. Advanced nodes alone already account for 65 to 74% of recent revenue. If Hsinchu shuts down, AI stops. Cars, planes, the cloud, guided weapons, everything slows down. China would also bleed. Cross-chain, insurance, freight, capital flight. In a world dependent on chips, who dares turn off the ventilator? Outside, the game is changing. Talisman Sabre 2025 brings together the US and 19 allies in a visible message to Beijing. But the cohesion is cracked. Few sign on paper that they will fight for Taiwan. In Aspen, the formula echoed: reassurance plus deterrence, promising not to seek formal independence, while arming the island so that the cost of taking it is prohibitive. The Pentagon reminds us, the plie is modernizing at an unprecedented pace, but faces corruption and purges that could delay the 2027 targets. The danger grows nonetheless. Deterrence works, until the day it fails. And when it fails completely. If nothing changes, the future arrives in layers. More fighter jets crossing the median line, more civilian ships surrounding ports, more cables cut on the seabed, more markets oscillating to the sound of sirens in Taipei. The question isn't just when, it's how quickly will we accept the new normal. Because every small test that goes unanswered becomes a precedent, and precedents accumulated become reality. In the next section, we'll face the open wound, what this says about us and what there's still time to do. That morning, when 5 Chinese missiles fell into Japan's economic zone, the word limit changed its meaning. What was once a warning became a method. 3 days after Lei Ching-te's inauguration, the joint Sword 22-4A exercises took place, and the message became crystal clear. The pressure can increase whenever Beijing wants. In the cold holes of Washington think tanks, the war games repeat the same scenario. Defensive victory possible, unacceptable cost. Dozens of ships, hundreds of aircraft, tens of thousands of casualties. Can you imagine the silence afterward? The question that remains is the most uncomfortable. If this is the price of preventing Taiwan's fall, is the world willing to pay it? Or will we normalize the pressure, inch by inch, until the island buckles on its own? The heart of doubt beats. In silicon, Taiwan manufactures more than 60% of the planet's semiconductors and more than 90% of the most advanced. In 2022, something like $2.45 trillion worth of goods crossed the strait. If Hsinchu shuts down, it won't just stop cell phones, it will stop AI data centers, planes, ships, satellites, and guided weapons. TSMC holds nearly 2/3 of the foundry market and virtually monopolizes 3 nanometers and 5 nanometers nodes, while expanding factories in Arizona to reduce systemic risk without cutting the umbilical cord with the island, who depends on Taiwan. Almost everyone who can replace it quickly. No one. And this is where fear turns to calculation. If a reversible blockade shuts down ports for weeks, how long until factories around the world go dark? The island breathes through long pipes. Almost all its energy comes from the sea. Gas by ships, oil by tankers, coal by holds that cross guarded routes. Analysts estimate a 97.7% external dependence. The buffer is short, something like 10 to 11 days of LNG, about 39 days of coal, and 146 days of oil. Is it possible to weather a crisis? Maybe, as long as the ships keep arriving. For food, the government has spread stockpiles and claims to have 7 months' worth of rice, with plans to ration and expand cultivation if the sea closes. Is that enough? Just until the next wave, because blockades don't need to be total to suffocate. It's enough to delay, increase prices, and create doubt. Those who live off imports also live by the clock. If nothing changes, the path's narrow. A legalistic maritime quarantine, with inspections and coastguards surrounding ports. A calibrated takeover of Kinmen or Matsu to test nerves. Or the ultimate gamble, an amphibious invasion with a missile rain on Taiwan, Okinawa, and Guam. CSIS studies describe the siege playbook and conclude that, even repelling the invasion, the price will cripple the US position for years and leave the Taiwanese economy in ruins. Meanwhile, the PLA trains, measures routes, crosses the median line, patrols with the Coast Guard, and normalizes what once shocked. The alarm rings every day. The temptation is to turn it off. But what if the next bell is the last before impact? Some point to a clock, 2027. Bill Burns said she ordered the plie to be ready by then. Ready isn't the same as determined, and corruption, purges, expulsions, and readiness doubts suggest real friction. Still, commanders warn, the US advantage is eroding, and China is producing ships faster. Taylor Fravel points out that, in Beijing, politics often outweighs operational preparedness. The summary is uncomfortable, the risk window is open, and the wind changes direction with every crisis. What will we do with this time? Strengthen deterrence, reduce dependencies, train civilian resilience, or watch the clock, hoping the hand miraculously skips a year. Abroad, the Allies are rehearsing their response. Talisman Sabre 2025 mobilizes more than 35,000 military personnel from 19 countries and displays aircraft carriers crossing seas monitored by Chinese satellites. Force is visible deterrence, but formal commitments remain scarce when the question is straightforward: to fight for Taiwan, yes or no? Between prudence and fear, the gray area grows where precedents become the norm. Perhaps the meaning of this story lies in a simple phrase: peace is not the absence of war, it is daily effort. Has the world learned anything from August 4, 2022? From May 20, 2024? From each incursion that tears the line? Or will we repeat it all again? The decision is still ours while there is still time to decide.